You chose him. Now I choose myself.
For my birthday, my wife left a frozen pizza on the counter and sent me a text that read, "Congrats." Just that, one word. No exclamation point, no heart emoji, nothing. A week earlier, she and her friends had thrown my best friend Jake a backyard bash complete with fireworks, a drone photographer, and enough craft beer to float a yacht. When I asked why the difference in treatment, she shrugged and said, "You're not really the celebrating type, Dave." I didn't reply. I didn't eat the pizza. I just grabbed my work bag and walked out the door of our crumbling craftsman house in this godforsaken mill town of Millbrook, Massachusetts. The paint was peeling off the shutters like sunburned skin, and the front steps sagged under the weight of 20 years of neglect. Once, this place had been grand. Now it was just another symbol of everything that had gone wrong in my life. That night, her mother texted me, "Why is everyone freaking out?" I stared at that message for a full 10 minutes, sitting in Murphy's bar with a lukewarm Budweiser in front of me. The bar was the kind of place where dreams went to die. Sticky floors, neon beer signs that flickered like dying fireflies, and the perpetual smell of stale cigarettes, even though smoking had been banned for years. It was my second home, mainly because my first home felt more like a prison. "You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes," said Murphy, the owner. His real name was Sean O'Malley, but everyone called him Murphy because he owned Murphy's Bar and because life was simpler that way. He was built like a fire hydrant, with arms that could probably bench press a Volkswagen and a face that had seen too many bar fights. "My wife thinks I'm not the celebrating type," I said, taking another sip of warm beer. Murphy snorted. "Your wife thinks a lot of things, most of them wrong." I'd known Murphy since high school, back when I was David Mitchell, star quarterback and future business owner. Now I was just Dave, a 42-year-old electrician who'd lost his electrical contracting business 3 years ago when the economy tanked and my biggest client went bankrupt. My wife Sarah had been understanding at first. "We'll get through this together," she'd said. But understanding had a shelf life, apparently. Sarah worked as a corporate lawyer at Henderson and Associates, the kind of sleek glass front office that screamed, "We charge $500 an hour and worth every penny." She wore power suits that cost more than my monthly salary and drove a BMW that I'd bought her back when I still had money. These days, she looked at me like I was a piece of furniture she was considering donating to Goodwill. "You know what your problem is, Dave?" Murphy said, wiping down a glass with a rag that had seen better decades. "You're too nice. Your wife treats you like garbage, and you just take it." "Marriage is about compromise," I said, repeating something I'd read in one of those self-help books Sarah had bought me for Christmas, right next to the frozen dinner cookbook and the How to Dress for Success guide. Murphy laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Compromise, my A. When's the last time she compromised on anything?" I couldn't answer that question, mainly because I couldn't remember. Sarah made the decisions in our house. Where we went on vacation, her choice, wine country. What we watched on TV, her choice, legal dramas. What we ate for dinner, her choice. Whatever she picked up on the way home from work, usually something that required minimal effort. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Don't wait up, working late on the Morrison case." The Morrison case. She'd been working late on a lot of cases recently. The Patterson case, the Williams case, the Henderson case. Always something that required her to stay at the office until well past midnight, coming home smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Let me guess," Murphy said, reading my expression. "Working late again?" "The Morrison case," I said. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." Murphy set down the glass and leaned forward. "Dave, you're my friend, so I'm going to tell you something you probably don't want to hear. Last Tuesday, I saw your wife at Chez Laurent. You know, that fancy French place downtown? She wasn't alone." My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. "Who was she with?" "Some guy in a $1,000 suit. They weren't discussing legal briefs, if you catch my meaning." I caught his meaning. I caught it like a baseball to the face. "Maybe it was a client," I said. But even I didn't believe it. Murphy gave me a look that said he'd heard that song before and didn't like the tune. "Dave, they were holding hands, and she was wearing that red dress you bought her for your anniversary. The one she said was too fancy to wear anywhere." The red dress. I'd spent $800 on that dress, back when $800 didn't represent a week's worth of groceries. She'd worn it once, to our anniversary dinner, and complained the entire time that it was too tight and made her look desperate. Apparently, it made her look just right for someone else. I drove home that night with Murphy's words echoing in my head like a broken record. Our house looked even more depressing in the darkness, with half the porch lights burned out and the lawn overgrown because I'd been too busy working double shifts to mow it. Sarah's BMW wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't surprising. The Morrison case, after all. Inside, the house felt like a museum of better times. Wedding photos on the mantel showed a younger, happier version of ourselves. Sarah in her wedding dress, radiant and laughing. Me in a tuxedo that actually fit, looking like I owned the world. Our daughter Emma, now 17 and away at boarding school, grinning, gap-toothed in family vacation photos from when we still took family vacations. I grabbed another beer from the fridge and noticed something that made my blood freeze. Stuck to the side of the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a pineapple was a receipt from the Grandview Hotel. The Grandview was the kind of place where rooms started at $400 a night and went up from there. The receipt was dated 3 days ago. Room service for 2, champagne, strawberries, the works. I'd been working a double shift 3 days ago, rewiring an office building downtown. Sarah had texted me that she was having dinner with her sister. Her sister lived in California. I studied the receipt like it was evidence in a homicide trial. Room 412, charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. But at the bottom, in Sarah's distinctive handwriting, was a note. Thank you for everything. S. My hands were shaking, actually shaking like I was some kind of amateur detective in a bad movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and it was falling apart in real time. I heard a car door slam outside, Sarah's BMW purring into the driveway like a satisfied cat. I quickly shoved the receipt into my pocket and tried to look casual, which was about as successful as trying to look casual while your house burned down around you. Sarah walked in wearing her navy blue power suit and carrying her briefcase like a weapon. She looked tired, but satisfied, like someone who'd just closed a big deal or won a difficult case, or spent the evening with someone who wasn't her husband. You're still up, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Couldn't sleep, I said. How was work? Exhausting. The Morrison case is more complicated than we thought. She set her briefcase down and kicked off her heels. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. How's your sister? I asked. Sarah froze. For just a second, but long enough for me to notice. My sister? You said you were having dinner with her the other night. How is she? Oh, fine, she's fine. Same old Linda, you know how she is. Sarah was already backing toward the stairs. I really need that shower, Dave. It's been a long day. She disappeared upstairs, and I heard the shower running a few minutes later. I pulled out the receipt and stared at it again. Room 412, champagne, strawberries. Thank you for everything. I walked to the laundry room, where Sarah's gym bag sat on top of the washing machine. I'd never gone through her things before. In 20 years of marriage, I'd respected her privacy. But 20 years of marriage apparently didn't mean what I thought it meant. Inside the gym bag, underneath her workout clothes, I found a men's dress shirt, size large. I wore medium. The shirt was expensive, the kind of thing that cost more than my entire wardrobe. Monogrammed on the cuff, AC. I didn't know anyone with the initials AC, but I was about to find out. The next morning, Sarah left for work without saying goodbye. She grabbed her coffee, kissed the air somewhere near my cheek, and disappeared in a cloud of expensive perfume and guilt. I called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was sick. Sick to my stomach, sick of being treated like a fool, and sick of pretending everything was fine when my marriage was obviously circling the drain like yesterday's bathwater. I spent the morning doing what any self-respecting husband would do in my situation. I Googled how to catch a cheating spouse and immediately felt like the biggest loser on the planet. The internet was full of advice from people who'd been exactly where I was, and none of it made me feel better about myself. Around noon, my phone rang. Emma calling from her boarding school in Vermont. Hey, Dad, she said, and I could hear the forced cheerfulness in her voice. Emma was 17, but she was smart enough to know when something was wrong. She'd inherited Sarah's intelligence and my stubborn streak, which was either going to make her incredibly successful or incredibly miserable. Hey, sweetheart, how's school? Boring. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. Mom said you guys might not be coming to Parents' Weekend next month. Is everything okay? I hadn't heard anything about Parents' Weekend, but that wasn't surprising. Sarah handled most of Emma's school stuff, claiming I was too busy with work to keep track of dates and deadlines. Everything's fine, I lied. Just busy with work. Dad, Emma's voice took on that tone that meant she wasn't buying what I was selling. I'm not stupid. I know things have been weird between you and Mom, and I know about Uncle Tony. Uncle Tony. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Who's Uncle Tony? Mom's friend, the guy who's been coming around when you're at work. She told me he was just a friend from her office, but Emma trailed off. But what? He bought her flowers last week. And not just any flowers. Roses. Red roses. Like a lot of them. Red roses. The universal symbol of romance, unless you were buying them for your mother or your wife was in the hospital. Sarah hated flowers. Always said they were a waste of money because they just died anyway. But apparently she didn't hate flowers from Uncle Tony. Emma, what does this Uncle Tony look like? Tall, dark hair, really good teeth. Drives a fancy car. A Porsche, I think. He dresses like he has money. AC Anthony something, or maybe Andrew or Alexander. The possibilities were endless, but the picture was getting clearer. Has he been around a lot? Emma was quiet for a moment. Dad, I probably shouldn't have said anything. I don't want to cause problems. You're not causing problems, sweetheart. I just want to know what's going on. He's been there 3 or 4 times that I know of. Always when you're at work. Mom introduced him as Uncle Tony, like he was family, but I've never seen him before. And the way they look at each other. Another pause. It's not the way you look at a friend. After I hung up with Emma, I sat in my kitchen staring at the peeling wallpaper and trying to process what I'd learned. Sarah was having an affair with someone named Tony. Someone with money, good teeth, and a Porsche. Someone who bought her red roses and took her to expensive hotels. Someone who wasn't me. I'd always known I wasn't good enough for Sarah. Even in high school, when we first started dating, she was out of my league. She was the valedictorian, the debate team captain, the girl who was going places. I was the quarterback with decent grades and big dreams. But I'd worked hard, built a business, given her the life she wanted. Until I lost it all. Now she'd found someone who could give her what I couldn't. Someone with money and status and probably a full head of hair. Someone who didn't come home with dirt under his fingernails and worry about paying the electric bill. I was angry, angrier than I'd been in years. But underneath the anger was something worse. Humiliation. How long had this been going on? How many people knew? Had Sarah and Uncle Tony been laughing about me behind my back? Had they been planning this while I was working double shifts to keep us afloat? My phone buzzed. A text from my old friend Jake. Drinks tonight? I've got news. Jake Morrison, my best friend since high school, the guy who'd been my best man, the guy Sarah had thrown the big birthday party for. Jake, who worked in real estate and drove a nice car and wore expensive suits. Jake Morrison, JM, not AC, but still. I texted back, sure, Murphy's at 8. I had questions, and Jake Morrison was going to answer them. Murphy's bar was busier than usual for a Thursday night. The local softball team was celebrating a win, and the jukebox was playing classic rock loud enough to wake the dead. I found Jake at our usual table in the back corner, nursing a craft beer that probably cost more than my lunch. Jake looked good. He always looked good. At 43, he still had most of his hair, a flat stomach, and the kind of confident smile that made people want to buy whatever he was selling, which in his case was real estate. Expensive real estate. Dave! He stood up and gave me one of those back-slapping man hugs that felt a little too enthusiastic. How's it going, buddy? Can't complain, I lied, sliding into the booth across from him. What's this news you mentioned? Jake's smile got even bigger, if that was possible. I closed the Riverside development deal. You remember, the one I've been working on for 6 months? $15 million. My commission alone is going to buy me a new boat. Congratulations, I said, and tried to mean it. That's great news. Thanks, man. I couldn't have done it without your wife's help, actually. Sarah's been amazing with the legal work. Really went above and beyond. Above and beyond. I ordered a beer and tried to keep my expression neutral. Sarah mentioned she was working with you on something. Yeah, she's been putting in a lot of extra hours. We've had to work some pretty late nights to get all the paperwork sorted out. Jake took a long drink of his beer. She's incredible, Dave. You're a lucky man. Lucky. Right. So these late nights, I said carefully. Where do you usually work? Your office? Sometimes. Sometimes we go to that little cafe downtown. The one with the good Wi-Fi. Sometimes we work at my place if we need to spread out documents. Jake shrugged. You know how it is with big deals. You work wherever you can focus. His place, documents, focus. Jake, can I ask you something? Sure, buddy, anything. Are you sleeping with my wife? The question hung in the air like smoke from a cigarette. Jake's beer stopped halfway to his mouth, and his confident smile flickered like a candle in the wind. The softball team cheered at something on the TV, but it sounded like it was coming from another planet. What? Jake's voice cracked slightly. Dave, what kind of question is that? The kind of question a husband asks when he finds hotel receipts and men's shirts that don't belong to him? Jake set down his beer very carefully. Dave, I think you might be misunderstanding something. Am I? Because my 17-year-old daughter knows about Uncle Tony. She knows about the roses and the fancy car and the way you two look at each other. I leaned forward. So let me ask again. Are you sleeping with my wife? Jake looked around the bar like he was hoping for an escape route. When he looked back at me, the confident smile was completely gone. In its place was something that looked almost like guilt. It's not what you think, he said quietly. Then tell me what it is. Jake ran his hands through his perfect hair. Look, Dave, Sarah and we've gotten close working on this deal. Really close. But it's not about Zex. It's about connection, understanding. She feels like you don't appreciate her anymore. So you decided to appreciate her for me? It's not like that. We didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. She's lonely, Dave. She feels ignored. You work all the time, and when you're home, you're either tired or watching TV or drinking beer with Murphy. I felt like I was falling down a very deep hole. How long? How long what? How long have you been screwing my wife? Jake flinched. 3 months, maybe 4? Dave, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to happen. 4 months of lies and late nights in hotel rooms. 4 months of coming home to a wife who was thinking about another man. 4 months of being the fool who believed in the Morrison case and business trips and working dinners. Does anyone else know? Jake looked miserable. Some people suspect. Sarah's worried about her reputation at work, so we've been careful. But in a town this size? He shrugged helplessly. In a town this size, everyone knew everything, which meant everyone knew that Dave Mitchell's wife was cheating on him with his best friend. Everyone except Dave Mitchell. I want you to stay away from her, I said. Dave, it's not that simple. We're in love. Love. The word hit me like a slap in the face. You're in love. I know how that sounds, but yes, we are. And she's going to leave you, Dave. She's already talked to a lawyer about divorce. The hole I was falling down suddenly got deeper. She's talked to a lawyer? She doesn't want to hurt you any more than necessary. She's hoping you can work something out amicably. Amicably. Like I was a business partner being bought out, not a husband being discarded. I stood up from the table. My legs felt unsteady like I was walking on the deck of a ship in rough seas. Jake? Yeah? We're not friends anymore. I walked out of Murphy's bar and into the cold Massachusetts night. Behind me, I could hear the softball team still celebrating their victory. But I felt like I just lost the biggest game of my life. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove around Millbrook for hours, past the abandoned textile mills and the empty storefronts downtown, trying to process what Jake had told me. Sarah was leaving me. She was in love with my best friend. She'd already talked to a lawyer, 20 years of marriage, and she couldn't even tell me herself. I ended up at the 24-hour diner on Route 9, drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil and staring out the window at the empty parking lot. The waitress, a tired-looking woman named Dolores, kept refilling my cup without asking. She'd probably seen plenty of men like me over the years, men whose lives had just imploded, men who had nowhere else to go. At 6 in the morning, I finally drove home. Sarah's BMW was in the driveway, which meant she'd actually slept in our bed for once. I found her in the kitchen, dressed for work and drinking coffee from the mug Emma had made her in 3rd grade pottery class. Where were you last night? She asked without looking up from her phone. I had drinks with Jake. Sarah's hand tightened slightly on her coffee mug. How is Jake? He's great. Really great. He told me about the Riverside deal, $15 million. That's a lot of money. It is. Sarah was still looking at her phone, scrolling through emails or text messages or maybe love notes from my ex-best friend. He also told me how helpful you've been, all those late nights working together. Now Sarah looked up. Her face was carefully neutral, the same expression she wore in court when she was cross-examining a hostile witness. It's been a complex transaction. I'll bet, Sarah, we need to talk. I'm going to be late for work. This is more important than work. Sarah sighed and set down her phone. What do you want to talk about, Dave? I want to talk about Uncle Tony. The color drained from Sarah's face like water from a broken sink. For a moment, she looked like the girl I'd married 20 years ago, young and vulnerable and caught off guard. Then her lawyer mask slipped back into place. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. Uncle Tony, the guy with the Porsche and the expensive suits, the guy who buys you red roses and takes you to fancy hotels, the guy who's been coming around when I'm at work. Sarah stood up from the table. Dave, I think you're confused. Am I? Because Jake told me you two are in love. He told me you're planning to leave me. He told me you've already talked to a lawyer. Sarah's carefully controlled expression finally cracked. Jake told you that? Last night at Murphy's, right after I asked him if he was sleeping with my wife. Dave, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to me for 4 months? How you've been making a fool of me in front of the entire town? How you've been planning to divorce me while I've been working my A off to keep us afloat? It's not like that. Then tell me what it's like, Sarah. Tell me how my wife falling in love with my best friend is somehow not what it looks like. Sarah sat back down heavily. For the first time in months, she looked tired. Really tired. Like the weight of keeping secrets had finally caught up with her. I didn't plan for this to happen, she said quietly. Jake and I were working together, and we started talking, really talking, about life, about dreams, about what we wanted for the future. And what you wanted didn't include me. Dave, we've been growing apart for years. You know we have. We don't talk anymore. We don't laugh together. We don't even sleep in the same bed half the time. Because you're always working late. Because you're always tired or drunk or watching TV. When's the last time you asked me about my day? Really asked, not just going through the motions. I tried to remember and couldn't. So you decided to find someone who would ask? I found someone who sees me, really sees me. Not just as the woman who pays the bills and keeps the house running, but as a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams. I see you. No, Dave. You see what you want to see. You see the woman who married you 20 years ago, not the woman I've become. And who have you become, Sarah? Someone who cheats on her husband? Someone who lies to her daughter? Someone who makes plans to destroy her family without even having the decency to discuss it first? Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare lecture me about decency. You've been checked out of this marriage for years. You lost your business and gave up. You stopped trying. You stopped caring about anything except your next beer and your next paycheck. I've been working my A off to support this family. You've been going through the motions. There's a difference. We stared at each other across the kitchen table. 20 years of marriage reduced to accusations and hurt feelings. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking and the sound of traffic on the main road. Normal sounds from a normal morning in a normal life. But there was nothing normal about this. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know. Are you leaving me for Jake? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I think so. Yes. When? I haven't decided. Soon. And Emma? Emma will understand, eventually. Will she? Because she already knows something's wrong. She knows about Uncle Tony and the roses and the way you two look at each other. She's 17, Sarah, not 7. She's going to know exactly what you did to this family. Sarah flinched. I'll explain it to her. How? How do you explain to your daughter that you destroyed her family because you were bored? It's not that simple. It never is it? It's always complicated when you're the one doing the cheating. Sarah stood up again and grabbed her briefcase. I'm going to work. We can continue this conversation later. No, I said. We can't. Because I'm done talking. Sarah paused at the kitchen door. What does that mean? It means you made your choice. Now I get to make mine. After Sarah left, I sat in the kitchen for another hour, drinking coffee and thinking about choices. Sarah had chosen Jake over me. She'd chosen excitement over stability, romance over history, possibility over reality. Now it was my turn to choose. I called in sick to work again and spent the day making phone calls. The first call was to a private investigator named Patricia Wells, who came highly recommended by a guy Murphy knew who'd gone through a messy divorce the year before. Patricia had a no-nonsense voice and a rate of $75 an hour, which was money I didn't really have but couldn't afford not to spend. I need proof of infidelity, I told her. Photographs, videos, documentation, all of the above. How long has this been going on? 4 months that I know of, maybe longer. Do you know where they meet? I gave her Jake's address. the Grand View Hotel, and a few other locations Jake had mentioned. Patricia took notes and asked practical questions about schedules and habits and the kind of evidence that would hold up in court. "This is going to cost you," she warned. "How much?" $1,500, maybe $2,000, depending on how long it takes and what kind of equipment I need. $2,000, more than I made in a week. But Sarah was planning to take me to the cleaners in divorce court, and I needed ammunition. Do it. The second call was to Emma's school. I told them I needed to speak with my daughter about a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. My family was definitely having an emergency. Emma called me back 20 minutes later. "Dad? What's wrong? The school said there was an emergency." "Emma, I need to ask you some questions about your mother and Uncle Tony, and I need you to be completely honest with me." There was a long pause. "Is this about the divorce?" My heart stopped. "What divorce?" "Mom called me last week. She said you and she were having problems and might be getting divorced. She said it wasn't my fault and that you'd both still love me no matter what happened." Sarah had told Emma about the divorce before she'd told me. My own wife had discussed the end of our marriage with our daughter while I was still in the dark about the affair. "What else did she tell you?" "She said she'd met someone who made her happy, someone who understood her better than you did. She said his name was Tony and that I'd like him." "How do you feel about that?" Another pause. "Honestly, I think it sucks. I mean, I know you and Mom haven't been happy for a while, but I didn't think she'd just replace you. Replace me." That's exactly what Sarah was doing, trading in her old model for a newer, shinier version. "Emma, I need you to know that I'm going to fight this, not to hurt your mother, but to protect myself. And you, do you understand?" "I think so." "Dad." "Yeah. I love you, and I don't care how much money Uncle Tony has or how nice his car is. You're my father, and that's not going to change." After I hung up with Emma, I made one more call. This one was to my lawyer, a guy named Bill Henderson who'd handled the legal work when I'd started my electrical business. Bill was semi-retired now, but he still took on the occasional case for old friends. "Dave, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "I need a divorce lawyer, Bill. A good one." "I'm sorry to hear that. What's the situation?" I gave him the basics, the affair, the lies, the fact that Sarah was already planning to leave me. Bill listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "This is going to be expensive," he said when I finished. "And ugly. Your wife's a lawyer, which means she knows how to play the game. But if you can prove infidelity, that gives us leverage. I've hired a private investigator." "Good. What about assets?" "The house, her car, my truck, some savings. Not much else. I lost most of our money when the business went under." "Kids?" "One daughter, 17, almost 18. That simplifies things. No custody battle, minimal child support. What do you want out of this, Dave?" "What did I want? I wanted my wife back. I wanted my best friend back. I wanted my old life back, the one where I owned a successful business, and people respected me and my family was intact. But I couldn't have any of that." "I want her to pay," I said. "I want everyone to know what she did. And I want to make sure she doesn't get to rewrite history and make me the bad guy." "That's going to cost you." "I don't care. She destroyed my marriage and humiliated me in front of the entire town. Now it's my turn." Bill was quiet for a moment. "Dave, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go down this road? Divorce is like war. Once you start shooting, everyone gets hurt. She started this war, Bill. I'm just going to finish it." That evening, I drove to Murphy's bar for what had become my nightly ritual of drinking beer and feeling sorry for myself. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I had a plan. Murphy was behind the bar, polishing glasses and watching a Red Sox game on the TV mounted in the corner. The bar was mostly empty, except for a couple of regulars nursing their drinks and pretending to care about baseball. "You look better," Murphy said when he saw me. "Less like someone ran over your dog. I'm taking your advice." "Which advice was that?" "About not being too nice." Murphy grinned. "About time. What's the plan?" I told him about the private investigator, the lawyer, and my conversation with Emma. Murphy listened and nodded approvingly. "Good," he said when I finished. "Your wife wants to play games? Let's see how she likes it when someone else knows the rules." "There's one more thing I need." "What's that?" "I need you to spread the word. Quietly. Let people know what's really going on. I'm tired of being the only one in town who doesn't know his wife is cheating on him." Murphy's grin got wider. "Dave, that's the best idea you've had in years." Patricia Wells was worth every penny I paid her. Within a week, she'd compiled a dossier on my wife's affair that would have made the FBI proud. Photographs of Sarah and Jake holding hands at restaurants, video of them entering and leaving the Grandview Hotel, credit card records showing expensive dinners and gifts, phone records showing hundreds of calls and text messages between them. The most damaging evidence was a recording Patricia had made using a device she'd planted in Jake's office. Sarah and Jake discussing their future together, including their plans to wait until after Emma graduated from high school to make their relationship public. "We just need to be patient," Sarah's voice said on the recording. "Dave's already suspicious, but he doesn't have any proof. If we're careful for a few more months, we can do this without destroying anyone." Without destroying anyone. Apparently, I didn't count as anyone. Jake's voice responded, "I hate sneaking around. I want to tell the world how I feel about you. Soon," Sarah promised. "After Emma's graduation, then we can be together openly." The recording was legally obtained and admissible in court, according to Bill Henderson. It was also devastating evidence of premeditation and planning. Sarah wasn't just having an affair. She was orchestrating the destruction of our marriage with the precision of a military campaign. But the evidence Patricia gathered wasn't just useful for divorce proceedings. It was also useful for something else entirely. Murphy had been busy spreading the word about Sarah's affair, and the gossip mill in Millbrook was working overtime. I started noticing things, the way conversations stopped when I walked into a room, the way people looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity, the way Sarah's friends avoided eye contact when I saw them around town. Everyone knew, and everyone was waiting to see what I would do about it. Sarah noticed the change too. She started coming home later and later, claiming she was working on new cases. But I knew she was just avoiding the awkwardness of being in the same house with me. Our conversations became even more strained and formal, like we were business associates rather than husband and wife. Jake, meanwhile, had started avoiding Murphy's bar entirely. Word on the street was that he was embarrassed about the affair becoming public knowledge. Apparently, sneaking around was exciting, but having everyone know about it was humiliating. Good. I wanted them both to be humiliated. Emma came home for a long weekend, and the tension in the house became unbearable. She tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She knew her family was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. On Saturday morning, Emma cornered me in the garage while I was pretending to organize my tools. "Dad, this is getting weird." "What's getting weird?" "This whole situation. You and Mom barely speak to each other. She's been crying in her room at night, and everyone at the country club is whispering about Uncle Tony." The country club. Of course, Sarah's affair was the hot topic at the country club. Nothing spread faster in Millbrook than gossip among bored rich women. "I'm sorry you have to deal with this, Emma. Are you really going to divorce her?" I set down the wrench I'd been holding and looked at my daughter. She was beautiful, smart, and completely innocent of the games adults played. She deserved better than this mess. "Your mother is the one who wants a divorce, sweetheart. She's the one who decided our marriage wasn't worth saving." "But you could fight for it. You could try to win her back. How do you fight for someone who doesn't want to be fought for?" Emma didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. That afternoon, while Sarah was at the office, or at Jake's apartment, or at another hotel room, I made a decision. I called Patricia Wells and asked her to meet me at Murphy's bar. Patricia was a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she could stare down a charging bull. She arrived carrying a briefcase full of evidence and wearing an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. "You've got enough evidence to bury them both in divorce court," she said, spreading photographs across the table. "Infidelity, fraud, emotional abandonment. Your wife's going to have a hard time explaining these away." The photographs were damning. Sarah and Jake kissing in his car. Sarah wearing the red dress I'd bought her, holding Jake's hand at a restaurant. Sarah leaving Jake's apartment building early in the morning, looking satisfied and guilty at the same time. What about financial records? That's where it gets interesting. Patricia pulled out a folder. Your wife has been spending money you don't have, credit cards you don't know about, loans against your house, even a second mortgage she took out without telling you. What? She's been financing this affair with debt, the hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the gifts. She's probably spent $15,000 in the last 4 months. $15,000. Money we didn't have borrowed against a house I'd thought we owned free and clear. There's more, Patricia continued. I did some digging on your friend Jake. He's not as successful as he pretends to be. That Riverside deal he was bragging about? It fell through 2 weeks ago. He's been lying about his income and his prospects. So, he's broke? Not broke, but not rich either. He's been living on credit and borrowed money, just like your wife. They're both pretending to be something they're not. I stared at the photographs and documents spread across the table. My wife and my best friend, living a fantasy life funded by debt and lies. They'd destroyed my marriage for an illusion. "What do you want to do with this information?" Patricia asked. "I want to destroy them." Patricia nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like someone who wants to win." The annual Millbrook Founders Day Festival was always held the first Saturday in October, and this year was no exception. The entire town gathered in the park downtown for food trucks, craft booths, and live music. It was the kind of wholesome community event that made Millbrook feel like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Assuming Norman Rockwell had painted small towns full of gossips, cheaters, and broken dreams. I'd never particularly enjoyed Founders Day, but this year I had a reason to attend. This year, I had something to say to the good people of Millbrook. Sarah tried to get out of going, claiming she had work to catch up on, but Emma insisted we attend as a family. "It might be the last time we're all together," she said, and Sarah couldn't argue with that logic without seeming heartless. So we went. The three of us, plus Jake, who showed up uninvited and acted like he belonged with our family. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than my truck payment and smiled at everyone like he was running for mayor. Sarah stayed close to him, occasionally touching his arm or laughing at his jokes, while I walked a few steps behind carrying Emma's purse and feeling like a third wheel at my own family outing. The whole town was there. Murphy had closed the bar for the afternoon and was working the beer tent. My former employees from the electrical business were scattered throughout the crowd, most of them now working for other contractors or struggling to find steady work. Sarah's colleagues from the law firm were clustered near the main stage, looking overdressed and out of place among the regular folks. At 3 o'clock, the mayor gave his annual speech about community values and small-town pride. At 3:30, the high school marching band played patriotic songs while people pretended to pay attention. At 4 o'clock, there was an open microphone session where anyone could address the crowd about community issues or upcoming events. That's when I made my move. I walked up to the microphone while the previous speaker, an elderly woman complaining about potholes on Elm Street, was gathering her notes. The crowd was restless and ready for the festival to move on to the beer and barbecue portion of the afternoon. They weren't expecting what I was about to give them. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said into the microphone. My voice echoed across the park, and conversations gradually died as people realized someone new was speaking. "My name is Dave Mitchell, and I've lived in this town for most of my life." I could see Sarah in the crowd, her face pale with sudden understanding. Jake was standing next to her, looking confused, but beginning to look worried. Emma was near the front, her eyes wide with the realization that her father was about to do something dramatic and probably embarrassing. "I want to talk to you today about marriage," I continued. "About trust and loyalty and what happens when those things are broken." The crowd was paying attention now. Nothing got people's interest like the promise of public drama. 20 years ago, I married the most beautiful, intelligent woman in this town. Sarah Henderson was everything I wasn't: educated, ambitious, destined for great things. But she chose me, and I spent the next 2 decades trying to be worthy of that choice. I could see Sarah trying to push through the crowd toward the stage, but there were too many people between us. Jake was following her, both of them looking panicked. I built a business. I bought a house. I worked 16-hour days to give my wife and daughter the life they deserved. When the business failed, I took whatever work I could find to keep us afloat. I thought that's what marriage meant: sacrifice, commitment, partnership. Murphy was grinning at me from the beer tent, giving me a thumbs up. Other faces in the crowd showed a mixture of curiosity, sympathy, and anticipation. But, apparently, I was wrong about what marriage means. Because while I was working those 16-hour days, my wife was working on something else entirely. She was working on replacing me. A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah had stopped trying to reach the stage and was standing frozen about 20 feet away, her face a mask of horror and fury. "You see, my wife has been having an affair. For 4 months, she's been sneaking around with my best friend, lying to me, lying to our daughter, lying to all of you. She's been living a double life, funded by secret credit cards and loans against our house." The murmur became a buzz of excited conversation. This was better than anything the festival organizers had planned. Now, some of you might be thinking, Dave, why are you airing your dirty laundry in public? Why not handle this privately, like civilized people? I paused and looked directly at Sarah. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face while Jake stood helplessly beside her. The answer is simple. Because my wife didn't handle this privately. She involved our entire community in her deception. She brought her lover to public events. She lied to mutual friends about her whereabouts. She made me a laughingstock while pretending to be a devoted wife. I pulled out one of Patricia's photographs and held it up. It was a picture of Sarah and Jake kissing in the parking lot of the very park where we were all standing. This photograph was taken 3 weeks ago, right here at the farmer's market. While I was at home fixing the leaky faucet in our kitchen, my wife was making out with Jake Morrison like a couple of teenagers. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Even the children had stopped running around and were staring at the drama unfolding on stage. So I want everyone to know the truth. Sarah Mitchell is a liar and a cheater. Jake Morrison is a backstabbing snake who seduces his friends' wives. And I'm done pretending that any of this is okay. I set the microphone back in its stand and walked off the stage. The crowd parted as I made my way through, some people patting my back supportively, others just staring in shock. Behind me, I could hear Sarah sobbing and Jake trying to calm her down. Emma caught up with me at the edge of the park. Dad, what did you just do? I told the truth. You humiliated Mom in front of the entire town. Your mother humiliated herself. And me. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Emma stared at me like she'd never seen me before. This isn't like you. Maybe it should have been like me a long time ago. I walked home alone, leaving my family to deal with the aftermath of my public confession. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation as 500 people processed what they'd just witnessed. By tomorrow, everyone in Millbrook would know the whole story. By next week, it would be the stuff of local legend. Sarah came home 3 hours later, her eyes red from crying and her voice hoarse with rage. How could you do that to me? She screamed. How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone? The same way you humiliated me, I said calmly. Except I only did it once. You've destroyed my reputation, my career, everything. Good. Now you know how it feels. Sarah stared at me with pure hatred. I want you out of this house, tonight. This is my house too. If you want me gone, you'll have to call the police. Maybe I will. Go ahead. I'd love to explain to the officers why my wife wants me arrested. I'm sure they'd find it very interesting. Sarah didn't call the police. Instead, she packed a bag and left, presumably to stay with Jake or one of her friends who hadn't completely written her off yet. As her BMW pulled out of the driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. The fallout from my Founders Day speech was swift and brutal. By Sunday morning, Sarah's law firm had received copies of Patricia's photographs and recordings. By Monday afternoon, Sarah was suspended pending an investigation into her conduct. By Tuesday, Jake's real estate license was under review by the state board. The gossip network in Millbrook worked with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. Everyone had an opinion about what I'd done, and most of those opinions were surprisingly supportive. Apparently, a lot of people had suspected Sarah was cheating and were impressed that I'd finally stood up for myself. Murphy's Bar became an unofficial headquarters for Team Dave. Every night, friends and acquaintances stopped by to buy me drinks and share their own stories of marital betrayal and revenge. I became something of a local celebrity, the guy who'd had the guts to call out his cheating wife in front of the entire town. Not everyone was supportive, of course. Sarah's friends from the country club treated me like I had a contagious disease. A few people thought I'd gone too far, that private matters should stay private, but even the critics had to admit that Sarah and Jake had brought their troubles on themselves. Emma came home from school the following weekend, and we had the conversation I'd been dreading. Everyone at school knows, she said. Someone posted a video of your speech on social media. It's gone viral. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. I'm not sorry about that. I'm sorry that it happened at all. Emma sat down across from me at the kitchen table. Dad, I understand why you're angry. I really do. But what you did to Mom, it was cruel. What your mother did to our family was cruel. What I did was justice. Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like revenge. Emma was right, of course. It had been revenge, pure and simple. But sometimes revenge and justice were the same thing. Your mother made choices, I said. She chose to have an affair. She chose to lie to us. She chose to plan a divorce without telling me. I just made sure there were consequences for those choices. And now our family is destroyed. Our family was already destroyed. I just made it official. Emma was quiet for a long moment. What happens now? Now, your mother and I get divorced. You finish high school and go to college. Life goes on. Will you ever forgive her? I thought about that question. Would I ever forgive Sarah for betraying our marriage, humiliating me in front of our friends and lying to our daughter? Would I ever forgive Jake for stabbing me in the back and seducing my wife? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday, but not today. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once Sarah realized she had no leverage. The evidence of her infidelity was overwhelming, and the financial records Patricia had uncovered showed a pattern of deception that made Sarah look like a calculating liar rather than a woman who'd simply fallen out of love. Bill Henderson was ruthless in the negotiations. Sarah would keep her car and her personal belongings, but everything else would be split evenly. The house would be sold and the proceeds divided. Sarah would be responsible for paying back the secret loans and credit cards she'd used to finance her affair. Jake, meanwhile, had bigger problems than a messy divorce. The state real estate board had found irregularities in several of his recent transactions, including the Riverside deal he'd bragged about. His license was suspended, and he was facing potential criminal charges for fraud. The golden couple, who'd thought they were so much better than boring old Dave Mitchell, had lost everything in a matter of weeks. 3 months after Founders Day, I got a call from Patricia Wells. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "Your wife and Jake Morrison broke up last week. Apparently love doesn't conquer all when you're both unemployed and facing lawsuits." "How do you know?" "Jake's been drinking at Mickey's Tavern across town, telling anyone who'll listen about how Sarah ruined his life. Seems he blames her for his legal troubles." So much for true love. When the money ran out and the pressure mounted, Sarah and Jake had turned on each other like rats in a sinking ship. What about Sarah? "Living with her sister in Boston. Word is she's trying to find a new job, but her reputation in Massachusetts legal circles is pretty much shot. She might have to move out of state to start over." Sarah would survive eventually. She was smart and tough, and she'd find a way to rebuild her life somewhere else. But she'd never again be the respected lawyer and pillar of the community she'd been in Millbrook. That version of Sarah Mitchell was dead and buried, eliminated by her own choices and my very public response to them. 6 months after Founders Day, I was a different man. Not necessarily a better man, but definitely a stronger one. The house sold quickly, and my half of the proceeds was enough to pay off my debts and put a down payment on a small apartment downtown. I'd started my own electrical business again, this time keeping it small and manageable. Word of mouth from my public stand against Sarah had actually brought me more customers than I'd expected. Emma graduated from high school and got accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship. She'd decided to study journalism, claiming she wanted to tell stories that mattered. I suspected my Founders Day speech had influenced that decision, though she'd never admit it. Sarah came to the graduation ceremony, sitting in the back row and leaving immediately after the ceremony ended. She looked older, more tired, but she was still beautiful. For a moment, watching her congratulate our daughter, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 25 years ago. But the moment passed quickly. Some things, once broken, couldn't be repaired. Murphy threw a party at the bar after graduation, and half the town showed up to celebrate Emma and wish her luck in college. It was the kind of community gathering that made Millbrook feel like home, despite everything that had happened. "You did good, Dave," Murphy said, handing me a beer. "Emma's going to be fine." "I hope so. She's tough, like her old man. She'll figure it out." Jake Morrison had left town 2 months earlier after pleading guilty to real estate fraud and receiving 2 years probation. I heard he'd moved to Florida, where he was working as a used car salesman. The mighty had definitely fallen. As the party wound down and people started heading home, Emma pulled me aside. "Dad, I want you to know something." "What's that?" "I'm proud of you. Not for what you did to Mom, but for how you've handled everything since. You could have become bitter and angry, but instead you rebuilt your life. That takes courage." "I had a good reason to rebuild. I wanted to be someone you could be proud of." "I was always proud of you. Even when you were drinking too much beer and feeling sorry for yourself." Emma hugged me. and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. 2 weeks later, Emma left for college, and I found myself alone in my small apartment with nothing but my thoughts and my memories. It would have been easy to fall into depression, to spend my evenings at Murphy's bar drowning my sorrows and reliving past glories. Instead, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went on a date. Her name was Linda, and she was a nurse at the local hospital. She was divorced, had 2 teenage kids, and wasn't looking for anything serious. Perfect for a man who wasn't sure he believed in marriage anymore. We went to dinner at a restaurant in the next town over, where no one knew our stories or our histories. We talked about books and movies and travel plans. We laughed at each other's jokes. We didn't mention ex-spouses or betrayals or public humiliations. It was wonderful. So, Linda said over dessert, I have to ask, are you the guy who gave that speech at Founders Day? The one that's all over YouTube? I sighed. Yeah, that's me. I thought so. You're famous, you know. That video has been viewed over 1 million times. 1 million times. My moment of public revenge had become internet entertainment. Do you regret it? Linda asked. Which part? The speech or the marriage that led to it? The speech. I thought about that question. Did I regret standing up in front of my entire community and exposing my wife's affair? Did I regret destroying Sarah's reputation and humiliating her in front of everyone she knew? No, I said finally. I don't regret it. She made her choices, and I made mine. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to stand up for myself. Linda smiled. Good answer. We had a second date the following week, and a third. Linda wasn't Sarah. She wasn't as beautiful or as intelligent or as ambitious, but she was kind and honest and present in a way Sarah had never been. She saw me as I was, not as a disappointment or a stepping stone to something better. Maybe that was enough. On a cold December evening, almost a year after I'd discovered Sarah's affair, I was closing up my shop when I saw a familiar figure standing across the street. Sarah, wearing a heavy coat and looking uncertain, like she wasn't sure she should be there. I locked the door and walked over to her. Hello, Dave. Sarah, what are you doing here? I wanted to talk to you, to apologize. It's a little late for apologies. I know, but I needed to say it anyway. Sarah looked older than her 40 years, worn down by the consequences of her choices. I'm moving to California next week, starting over. Good luck. Dave, I want you to know that I never meant for things to end the way they did. I never wanted to hurt you or Emma. But you did hurt us. You destroyed our family for a fantasy. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than you'll ever know. We stood there in the cold December air. 2 people who'd once loved each other enough to promise forever. Now we were strangers, connected only by a daughter and a shared history of mistakes. I heard you're seeing someone, Sarah said. I am. Is she nice? She's very nice, Sarah nodded. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Sarah. I hope you find whatever you're looking for in California. Thank you. Sarah turned to walk away, then stopped. Dave, that speech you gave at Founders Day, it was the most honest thing anyone's ever said about me. I hated you for it, but it was true. Every word. I know. I hope someday Emma will understand why you did it. She already does. Sarah smiled sadly and walked away into the darkness. I watched her go, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret, just a sense of completion, like a chapter of my life had finally ended. The next morning, I called Linda and asked if she wanted to have dinner. She said yes, like she always did. Simple, uncomplicated, honest. It was exactly what I needed. Emma came home for Christmas break, full of stories about college life and new friends and exciting possibilities. She seemed happier, more confident, like she was finally becoming the person she was meant to be. On Christmas Eve, we had dinner at Murphy's bar, which had become our tradition. The place was decorated with twinkling lights and fake snow, and Murphy was wearing a Santa hat that looked ridiculous on his bald head. To new beginnings, Emma said, raising her glass of soda. To new beginnings, I agreed, clinking my beer bottle against her glass. Outside, snow was falling on the streets of Millbrook, covering the potholes and the peeling paint and the broken dreams with a blanket of white. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new possibilities, but tonight, sitting in a warm bar with my daughter and my friends, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The price of loyalty, I'd learned, was sometimes higher than anyone should have to pay. But the cost of betrayal was even higher. Sarah had paid that price, and so had Jake. They'd traded their integrity for a moment of excitement and lost everything that mattered. I'd made a different choice. I'd chosen to fight back, to refuse to be a sufferer, to demand the respect I deserved. It hadn't been pretty or noble or particularly mature, but it had been honest. And in the end, honesty was all any of us really had.